and welcome everyone. I hope you and your families and your colleagues are all doing very well today. I'd like to first start by thanking you for participating in this panel discussion, and for those of you listening for taking the time to listen to what we have to talk about today. So I'm really excited about this, and although we can't host this in person, I think that you'll find this equally as informative. So my name is Jared Borcat. I'm the Vice President of Corporate Development at Emergent Biosolutions, and I'll be moderating the panel today. So today we have an amazing panel to discuss collaborating for growth in the BioHealth Capital Region, where we'll be talking about one of what I think is the hottest areas in the country if you're in the biohealth industry or the life sciences industry. So we have a great arraignment here of panelists. So welcome to all of the panelists, and thank you again for taking time. What you'll see with the panelists is we'll have a variety of perspectives today that include a health system, university, we have small company representation, we have large company representation. So the panelists that we have today are Tracy Vederick, and she's the Chief Operating Officer, Oncology R&D at AstraZeneca. And I will give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves in more detail momentarily. We have Amy Adams, if you want to wave and say hello to the group here. She's the Executive Director of the Institute for BioHealth Innovation at GMU. Colin Daniel, who's the Vice President and Chief Innovation Officer at Children's National. Hello, Colin. And then Bill Hurl, who's the CEO, Chairman of the Board, and founder of Immunomic Therapeutics. So hello, Bill.
Yes.
So our goal today is to have everyone who's listening to this walk away with a nugget of information, a new idea, a fresh perspective, or something that you can use to apply in your role after this panel discussion. So just to give you an idea of the format that I'll be using here, we'll start with brief introductions by all of the panelists, and then we'll move into a series of questions to really talk about what it's like to collaborate in the BioHealth Capital Region, what the BioHealth Capital Region is all about, and why there's so much momentum, excitement, and growth in this region. So hopefully that sounds good to everybody. And that I will hand it over. Well, why don't we start with you, Tracy? If you could just give a brief introduction, tell us who you are, and maybe just a very brief intro about your company.
Sure, thanks, Jared. Hi, everyone. My name is Tracy Vederick. I'm Chief Operating Officer for Oncology R&D at AstraZeneca. I've been in the industry for almost 20 years, and I've been at AZ for the last 8 years in a number of roles, including business development and commercial. And right now, my current role is overseeing operational aspects of oncology R&D, our business, including our strategy, our planning, and prioritization of projects to support our ongoing management of the business, of the oncology business. I'm also responsible for our site operations for all of our U.S. R&D sites, including our primary hub in Gaithersburg, Maryland, in the BioHealth Capital Region.
Great, thank you, Tracy. Halali, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Colin Daniel. I'm Vice President and Chief Innovation Officer at Children's National Hospital. Children's National Hospital is a 313-bed acute care hospital in Washington, D.C., but we also serve communities in Maryland and Virginia. We have over 900 physicians and 2,000 nurses at Children's National, and over 7,000 employees that, again, come from DC, Maryland, and Virginia. My role at Children's National is Chief Innovation Officer in charge of translating discoveries in our hospital-based operation research to practical applications for children, so to commercialize all good ideas from bench to bedside. We also embrace the notion of open innovation, by which we partner with external entities, specifically with startup companies, to introduce their good ideas into our practice. I've been with Children's National for over 10 years. Prior to that, I was with Accenture, Intelsat, and Georgetown University.
Great. Thank you, Kalali. Amy, why don't we go to you now?
Thanks, Jared. It's certainly a pleasure to join the panel today. As Executive Director of the Institute for BioHealth Innovation, I support about 200 faculty and 1,000 students to advance biomedical and health research. One of the big priorities is aligned with this panel discussion, so fostering partnerships across the state, across the region, and around the world. Our SciTech campus of George Mason University is located in Prince William County, and that's been where we've had tremendous investments in facilities to support growth of the bioeconomy. The county has invested about $1.8 million to set up a startup lab accelerator and is expecting to open a 30,000 square foot life sciences labs facility next November.
All right. Thanks, Amy. Phil, why don't we go to you, and then I'll say a few more words, and then we'll get started here.
Okay, thank you, Jared, and appreciate the opportunity to participate on the panel. And with such a fantastic panel, I'm sure everybody will be really intrigued with the conversation. So looking forward to today's event. I'm CEO of Immunomic Therapeutics. I've been a bio entrepreneur now for 20 years. Immunomic Therapeutics, we founded in 2006 out of technology from Johns Hopkins University around immune system activation. And so we first applied that in allergy and sold that to Astellas Pharma in 2015 for over $300 million in cash. So that was kind of a nice win, made all my shareholders happy. And then since then, we've been working and applying the platform in immuno-oncology. And so our lead activity is in collaboration with researchers at Duke and the University of Florida for glioblastoma, and that's in a phase 2 study. And so then we have a number of other candidates in the pipeline also around immuno-oncology. So as for me personally, I think I've tried to help the region by taking in the people that have been needing a little bit extra lab space. We've been fortunate that we've had some extra space here at Immunomic Therapeutics, and we've tried to help some of the younger companies just get off the ground and do a few experiments. So that it's been sort of my little give back to the region to help get companies off the ground. And I think it's important that we do collaborate. So I'm looking forward to this panel discussion.
Great, thank you, Bill, and thanks again to everyone for joining us. So maybe before we get started with questions, I just wanted to make a few brief remarks. One is about the BioHealth Capital Region. So for those of you listening to this panel discussion who aren't familiar with the BioHealth Capital Region, it's probably worth mentioning that the BioHealth Capital Region represents Maryland, DC, and Virginia. And there's a little bit of an interesting history behind that I'll talk about. But maybe first, just to understand the context in which the BioHealth Capital Region exists relative to the other biohealth clusters in the country. You may be familiar with Genetic Engineering and News, and in their annual reporting of biohealth clusters, the BioHealth Capital Region ranked number 4, which was up from number 6 just a few years ago. And when you ask the question, well, why is that? That's a little bit of what we'll talk about today. And a lot of that has to do with collaboration, the way in which people work together, and how folks from outside the region are investing in the region. In fact, maybe 2 or 3 interesting statistics about this region. When you look at VC funding in the region, we rank number 3 in the country. In fact, in last year, there was over $1 billion in investment in just 44 deals. The NIH funding, we rank number 3rd, patents number 3rd, lab space number 4, and then employment number 9. And with employment, we have some of the brightest scientific talent in the entire country right here in our own backyard. And in addition to that, we also have the federal institutions. So while we don't have representation from the federal institutions on this panel, one thing that I can say is just from my own experience, even prior to Immersion, that being able to collaborate with federal institutions in our own backyard, I think is one of the great advantages of working within this region. So the other point I wanted to highlight here before I start with the questions is, if we think about the history of the BioHealth Capital Region and how that name came about and when a lot of the momentum really started building, it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago when there was a recognition within the industry in this region that we really had to do a more effective job of working together, getting to know each other, understanding the value that each of the companies, the institutions, and the federal labs could offer in supporting each other. And I think what we've seen is, even as one example of that momentum, there was a conference that was started by AstraZeneca and MedImmune and BioHealth Innovation and a few other partners, I guess about 6 years ago. That has grown to the point where there are over 1,200 registrants every year. So when you think about a pretty amazing local regional conference, I think that has really stimulated some of the collaboration that we see here. There was also an regional investment conference that was started about 2 years ago in collaboration with AstraZeneca, JP Morgan, Wilson Sonsini, BioHealth Innovation, where we had over 100 companies and 40 investors spending the day at AstraZeneca trying to identify great opportunities to invest in. So I think we've seen a lot of tremendous growth, a lot of history behind this, and a lot of great small companies in this area, such as Immunomic Therapeutics is just one example, who are really gaining great momentum. So with that said, why don't we go ahead and get started with some of the questions for the panelists. So maybe the first thing that I'd like to talk a little bit about is sort of we're in a very unique time now. And I think everyone is experiencing this pandemic in different ways. Companies are reacting very differently. And in responding to it, I think collaboration is an important aspect of that. So I'd be curious if anyone wants to make just a few comments about what your company is doing either to address or identify solutions for the COVID pandemic, and how has being in this region helped you on that front. So any volunteers? If not, I'll go ahead and pick somebody.
I'll comment. I'll go first. I'll be the guinea pig here.
All right, thanks, Bill.
So for the COVID-19 situation here, we've actually been able to keep our company relatively operational because we have so many lab experiments going on, and it was a requirement for people to periodically come in and take care of their experiments. But we had kind of proactively, thinking more in terms of snow as actually was a bigger issue, provided everybody the ability to work from home in instances where getting to the office was hazardous due to bad weather. So that actually turned out to be very beneficial for us, and we hunkered down a little bit before even the governor mandated that requirement. And we've just maintained our distancing around the building. So we put together some policies so everybody understands what the rules are and coming into the building and being safe. So I think we've done we've tried to take care of our employees, and we were fortunate that we were already set up for working at home. So we haven't lost too much momentum in our projects due to the coronavirus outbreak. But and then specifically as a company that has a vaccine platform, of course, we started working on that. And I prefer to take our approaches more like the tortoise than the hare. So I hope that slow and steady does ultimately win the race. But we put together a couple different collaborations that utilize our platform and other platforms from people in our network. So we have 3 different COVID-19 vaccine designs that are in animal model studies right now. And hopefully we have something that looks viable for going into the clinic later this year. And so having the ability actually to draw on, for example, the laboratories and workers that have been at Johns Hopkins and worked in the laboratory of Tom August, turned out to be a great resource for us. And that's one option for us in terms of vaccine design. So when you look at an organization like Johns Hopkins, obviously you have a wealth of talent there and many ideas. And so that's a great resource for us to be able to draw on to help build what we think is going to be an effective COVID-19 response.
That's great, Bill. I think on behalf of all of us in the country, we appreciate all the efforts that the folks there are doing on that. So anybody else want to comment on that question?
Jared, I'd be happy to jump in. Like Bill, AstraZeneca too has really been focused on keeping our lab operations going while we've scaled back our office-based employees and having most everybody working from home. We've also been focused on keeping our manufacturing facilities running so we can produce those medicines that are on market or in clinical trials so that patients can continue to access them during these difficult times. As far as our approach to directly addressing COVID-19, we've got a multi-pronged approach. So we've really looked at some of the medicines that we currently have on the market and evaluated potential to use those in the COVID setting. And we actually have some open clinical trials going with one of our cardiovascular and metabolic products, and as well as one of our oncology products to treat different phases of the disease of COVID. We're also investigating the potential for monoclonal antibody treatment or prevention. That's in development now. And of course, we've announced the partnership with Oxford and around the vaccine. And so, you know, it's been very helpful being here in the region and being able to respond quite quickly and work with BARDA to secure that plan to access the federal funding to help us support the advancement, development, and distribution of a potential vaccine if we're successful across the U.S. So that's one of the many things I think which we were able to rely on some of our relationships and just having the federal institutes here in our backyard that we work very closely with over many years, and being able to collaborate and show that importance of the collaboration for innovation.
Yeah, and Tracy, if I remember correctly, I think I saw that Pascal Soriot, the CEO of AZ, said that AZ would have the first vaccine. Do I remember that correctly in a public announcement? The first therapeutic.
So we are working on the therapeutic option, an antibody, and we haven't started clinical trials with that yet. But the vaccine itself that we've entered into a license agreement with Oxford University, that is already in a phase 1/2, and we're gearing up to actually start a large 1,000-patient phase 3 as soon as we get results from that phase 1/2.
Okay, great. And I think somebody else might have wanted to comment.
Sure, this is Amy from George Mason. Tracy and Bill, really great to hear all the amazing work that your teams are doing. We also have a phased approach bringing folks into the lab, especially those focused in COVID-19 work. Some of the infrastructure that we have that's really made it possible is we have one of the 13 regional biocontainment laboratories, so we can work with the active virus, and also a CAP/CLIA certified laboratory to be able to translate and send those findings to the FDA for 510(k) approval. Many of our researchers have developed platform technologies which helped us to pivot during this time. So we have several working in diagnostics, in developing vaccines and vaccine platforms, but it's really important to note that that's not in silo, but definitely in partnership with other industries, academic institutions, and healthcare systems in the region, and also globally. So partnerships is just critical to everything that we do. And also I wanted to mention really excellent activity down in Richmond. They recently received a $354 million BARDA grant for Flowcorp for advanced manufacturing of materials that go into the therapeutics for COVID-19. So really great win, I think, for the United States to have those additional manufacturing capabilities as materials are harder and harder to come by from global locations.
And I wanted to comment last, Jared. So from Children's National Hospital perspective, we are a Ebola response center, so we were kind of prepared for outbreak. Not 100%, but we knew that another pandemic was coming up and inevitable. So we ramped up some of our capabilities in that domain to address the outbreak of this pandemic. First, we worked with our regional area adult hospitals to make sure that care is regionalized. So we got regulatory certification to be able to care for patients up to 30 years of age. We started receiving these patients at the Children's Hospital, so we dedicated an isolation unit for adult patients to be cared for. We were the first testing site in the District of Columbia that started testing through a drive-through mechanism. So that actually happened at the very early onset of the pandemic, and to date, we have tested over 2,000 children in the District of Columbia. 27% of that population were positive. Also, if you all remember, at the beginning of the pandemic, we had headlines that children are not affected by coronavirus, and that it was a mild case for kids. Although that is true, because children in general comprise a healthy population, 25% of the population, but relatively healthy. But we started seeing very unusual cases at Children's National. So the multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, which was known to us, but we found a pattern that, we were seeing more and more of those cases. So we raised the red flag. We were first to raise that red flag that, this might be connected with COVID-19. So we were quick to publish our finding in the Journal of Pediatrics, and that became a national awareness that kids are, we're seeing kids that are severely affected, in fact, by this virus. As part of research, so as you know, we have 5 areas of excellence in research. I would mention right now 2 of them that directly responded to this pandemic. One is our device development group. So our Sheikh Zayed Institute for Pediatric Surgical Innovation has engineering and prototyping facility that quickly started to respond to the national shortage and the regional shortage of PPEs. So we were able to fabricate some of the PPEs for our own employees, health care workers, but also some regional as well. And our cancer and immunology researchers also quickly established collaboration, regional collaboration to start working on some testing and diagnostics. So I'll stop here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kalali. Yeah, so it's a tremendous amount of work by everybody, and I guess I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about some of the efforts at Immersion and how we're addressing the COVID pandemic and from a collaboration standpoint. So for those of you who are listening to this and aren't familiar with Immersion Biosolutions, we are a life sciences company, and we focus on addressing public health threats. And our mission is to protect and enhance life. And we actually have a company that was built a little over 20 years ago with an anthrax vaccine. And fast forward to today, we have structured several collaborations, some of which were local, really to address this pandemic. So we've set up several manufacturing partnerships. Novavax is a local company that we have partnered with recently on one of their vaccine technologies and manufacturing for that. And we also set up a collaboration with J&J that was announced recently. And you may or may not have seen some of the announcements recently. We just signed a collaboration agreement with BARDA, and I think this was a transformative deal that I think will be incredibly impactful and will help ensure that when it comes time to manufacture vaccines or therapeutics for the COVID response, that we are there, we're ready, we have the capacity, and that we can help in this fight against it. So I think from a collaboration standpoint, working with the federal government, working with local companies, I think has been really instrumental in our ability to do that. So maybe switching gears a little bit from the COVID pandemic, and let's talk about collaboration in general in this region. And I guess what I'd like to ask the panel is your perspective on, from a collaboration standpoint, what do you find great about operating in this region? So I think a lot of us have options. We can be located in the BioHealth capital region or Boston or San Francisco. I think we've all chosen to work and operate here. And I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the collaborations or benefits of being here from that standpoint. And maybe before I turn it over to the panelists, I'll just give one example of a collaboration that I was involved in and my team led. This was probably 6 or 7 years ago at this point, but the National Institute of Standards and Technology, we had colleagues from AstraZeneca and MedImmune meet with them to really understand where there was overlapping interest. And as a result of those discussions, we initiated the first umbrella CRADA of its kind with NIST. And under the umbrella agreement, we kicked off 9 projects. So that's just one example from a federal institution standpoint of we have found value. And that was, again, a really exciting collaboration and one that, at least when I left the organization 2 years ago, was still in effect and still very productive. So would love to turn that over if there are any volunteers here to kick us off with this question.
Go ahead, Bill. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll just give you two examples, one commercial and one academic, as the way that we've approached things. MaxCyte is one of our key partners for our lead program in glioblastoma, and loading the dendritic cells using kind of archaic technology as was being done at the academic institution would not get the job done for a commercial product. So I've known Doug Dorsler for a long time, and it was very nice to be able to draw on their expertise to integrate their platform into our manufacturing process. So that's been a great resource for us. And then at Johns Hopkins, we've been working with Drew Partle on a next antibody candidate. And so it's nice also to be able to go back to our founding organization and interact with somebody as prestigious as Drew Partle to have an additional pipeline product. So I think those are great resources. I mean, it's a great region. You can get anywhere up and down the East Coast very easily, even now. And I think that plays a big part in really making this region a bio hub.
All right, thanks, Bill. Kalali, I think you wanted to comment as well.
Yes, so I wanted to comment on a couple of regional collaboration. First is I'm the principal investigator of the National Capital Consortium for Pediatric Device Innovation, which is funded by the FDA, and we're one of the 5 centers of excellence in pediatric device innovation in the country. that this consortium includes a good example of regional collaboration. So members of this consortium include University of Maryland, A.J. Clark School of Engineering, that is our partner in leading this consortium, but also BioHealth Innovation is a member that provides business reimbursement and trial design expertise to the consortium. So it was very important for us to put together members that complement each other's experience and create a very rich environment for device innovators and device sponsors to bring more pediatric products to market to address an unmet need that we currently have, which is the lack of devices in the market that were specifically tested for children. So this is a great example of where we all came together to establish this consortium. Also, the effort that Amy mentioned earlier out of Richmond, this collaboration with VCU and some entrepreneurs in the Richmond area that created the startup to address the drug shortage. So one of our faculty investigators, who is Marshall Summer, and is leading the Rare Disease Institute for Children's National, was also a party in that effort. So we do collaborate with partners in Maryland, Virginia, and we're located in the District of Columbia that doesn't have its own bio organization, if you will, or any trade organization. So we partner, and we're so happy to have Maryland and Virginia in our backyard.
Kalali, that's really interesting that you mentioned about the trade organization. So before I was at AstraZeneca at Medimune, I was up in Boston for 10 years. And when I was looking to come down to the DC area, I was looking for something like MassBio that could help point me to what are the companies, what does the region look like? And there just wasn't anything. And I'm really proud to say that AZ and previously Medimune played a significant role in helping to build and grow this region, largely under the guide of Jared as well when he was at Medimune and AZ. And now as I become more involved in the BioHealth Capital region and the various activities that we all do together, I'm constantly surprised by that, not only the number of companies that are here and are building, or new companies that are coming in to the region, but also the quality of the science that's being developed here. It's truly amazing. And I think, the region has really developed multiple opportunities for networking and partnering, which I think is very important. As you say, we're not as concentrated as some of the other areas. Boston, there was a lot just around us in Cambridge, and then maybe Waltham, but in this area, we're spanning Virginia and Maryland and DC, and so we're not as concentrated as some of those other regions. But the partnering opportunities and the development that we have, it really, I think, helps companies to develop the relationships, even though we are a little bit more spread out, and provide support and mentorship to these companies as they're growing. From a collaboration perspective, maybe I'll take it from a slightly different angle, in that one of our key experiences at AZ is as a larger company, actually being able to spin out a smaller biotech company. We spun Biella out about 2 years ago, and while we've been supportive of the company, I think they had an opportunity to go wherever they wanted to for that company. They decided to stay here in the Maryland area, and we've been part of and able to support and watch the success that they've had to date, as far as raising money, development, and I really think that's a testament to the opportunities that are available within this region.
Yeah, I think those are some really good points, Tracy. All right, so I think as one of the founding members of the BioHealth Capital Region, and just adding a little bit to what you were saying, Tracy, I think some of those opportunities for people to connected around here that have occurred over the past couple of years, and I think that's probably how all of us know each other, are things like CEO dinners and working together to develop the name of the BioHealth Capital Region, which actually took about 150 stakeholders in this region to develop that name. And I think that in itself was a really interesting effort that we ended up hiring an outside agency from New York to help with that. And then there was also the, and I'll give credit to AstraZeneca and formerly MedImmune for doing this, but opening up their doors for happy hours with the external scientific community. So those were just some of the sort of tactical ways, I think, underlying some of your comments, Tracy, that helped bring folks together in this region. So we talked a little bit about coming from a different region. I'd love to know people's perspectives on, if you were talking to a colleague in Boston or San Francisco or New York, and you said, okay, there's one thing that I love about this region that would or should make you think about coming down here. I realize the concentration aspect of it is not something that we can compete on with Boston or San Francisco, unless Amy and Kalali, maybe you want to move the university and Children's National up to Montgomery County, then we can get that greater density. But in the absence of that, I'd love to hear what is that maybe single thing that you would tell a colleague up there.
Jared, I apologize. I don't have just one single, but just a few that I think that are really important. I think,
okay,
you know, we talk about collaboration, but there's a true commitment to collaboration, which is very different than just, you know, saying this is what we're doing. It's truly amazing to see the work that's being done across healthcare institutions, academic institutions, and our very innovative companies in the BioHealth Capital Region. I think access to the federal government is just such a huge opportunity that we have, being able to meet regularly with program officers and help to understand what their priorities are, and being able to leverage our expertise and capabilities to solve those huge problems that we have in healthcare. Also the talent. So we have fantastic institutions across DC and Maryland, and the talent largely stays in the area, which creates that pipeline for the workforce.
So I think
that really is interesting.
I was just going to say, I think that's really well said, and not much to add to it, other than to say there really is this strong desire for the local organizations to build our presence and to build the BioHealth Capital Region, which I think is absolutely key. It's this coming together of people caring about the region and trying to expand it. And I mean, ultimately, I think that helps all of us. It helps us all attract the talent that we want and helps us build that community for all of those reasons that Amy mentioned.
Yeah, I think you're right. And talking about the talent staying here, that was something that when we were going through the initiative to develop a name for the region, that level of commitment, it was really deep. It wasn't a lot of people here just because they had a job, but they really felt like they could pursue their passion, and they could get it done here. They could make it happen, and they had all the tools and resources that were needed for that. So it's interesting you highlight the fact that people like being here.
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments on that topic? Otherwise, I will move on. Lala, it looks like you might want to say something.
Yeah, I would also add, you know, the fact that, you know, somebody told me long time ago that, you know, the culture in Silicon Valley is that, you know, everyone tries to be a matchmaker, you know, make an introduction, connect the dots. And I would say that, you know, in our region, you know, in this ecosystem, that's very true as well. I know that, you know, we all open up our Rolodex to help someone get connected. So we do have that culture in place. And I also want to add that, you know, being in in nation's capital helps us to be influencers in terms of advocacy and lawmaking. So specifically, my group for pediatric devices works very closely with our government affairs to organize Hill Days, for example, on Capitol Hill, and we invite our colleagues from the region as well as other regions in the country to join us in advocating. So I think, we take that leadership role, taking advantage of our geographic location, and that is something very unique.
Yeah, Kalala, I'll give you an example of where that willingness to make connections actually happened this morning, and it happened with me. I was talking to somebody in this region who's trying to bring a company from another country to the U.S. That focuses on therapeutics in a specific area. That specific area, I happen to know a leading expert in that field who is also local. So the last thing I did before getting on this panel discussion was I connected them by email and was texting them just to give them a heads up. So I think that the value that this KOL or this thought leader will be able to add, hopefully, should be extremely valuable for this company that's moving to the U.S. And I think you're right, just having that spirit and willingness to do that and to kind of open up our Rolodex, I think does make a big difference. Ultimately, I think hopefully people find that incredibly valuable. So there's a thread that you talked about, Amy, and I've heard it a couple of times that I just want to pull on a little bit more, and that is with respect to federal institutions. So I've heard comments from people outside of this region. They say, well, if I need to talk to the FDA, I will set up a meeting with the FDA. And they don't see it being located in close proximity to the federal institutions as being very helpful. And I'm just curious if anyone has a perspective on how that can be helpful in a way that may not be quite as obvious to somebody outside looking into the region. I think I gave an example earlier about NIST, but the opportunity we had to prompt and spur that collaboration was because we were able to have 30 people, 30 great scientists from NIST come to MedImmune and AstraZeneca to have that discussion, to meet with our scientists, and that was really how the innovative ideas got sparked. And that was really, I think a benefit to being located close to NIST. So I'm just curious if anyone else has any insights they'd like to share on what are those benefits that may not be so obvious to folks on the outside.
Well, I certainly think that access to the FDA is really important for our industry, and I think that casual conversations, you often learn a lot more than in the formal settings of pre-IND meetings or IND meetings. So I think just being able to have that little extra personal touch and having access to both scientists and regulatory officials for our industry and program managers for grants. I think that was mentioned earlier. That's hugely beneficial to get some insight. I mean, especially after having served on a couple of grant panels, kind of understanding that mechanism goes a long way towards being successful with applications. So I've always been a big advocate of the personal touch. And of course, at the moment, it's a little bit more difficult to do, but I think that as time goes on, we'll get more ability to meet in person, and I just think that's just a tremendous advantage for us.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Bill, I couldn't agree more, and I would say two others that we've had really great opportunities is to collaborate with the intramural government labs, and then also being able to access some of the really sophisticated equipment that they have to advance some of the research that we're doing. So that's been another benefit in addition to those personal interactions with the government folks.
I would agree with both Amy and Bill, and I wanted to add that, while the federal government, NIH and FDA try to make themselves equally available to those in the region and other areas of the country, but that is very specific to their grantees and to their constituents. When it comes to interaction with private entities, you know, companies, that makes a big difference. Location in that case makes a huge difference. And I think, you know, there is a benefit of being in this area to have that constant interaction, frequent interaction that, again, you know, because you're a for-profit entity, you have to make that type of effort to establish that type of relationship. And I think location in that case helps. And I want to also emphasize the difference between, you know, NIH interacting with its NIH or FDA interacting with their constituents and grantees versus with for-profit companies.
And just to build on that, so I do really believe that the proximity is helpful to just to make for more natural collaborations. You know, having the NIH and the NCI in our backyard is really helpful as we think about key programs that we're developing for our own oncology portfolio. And I had mentioned, I know a lot of us have said that we've been able to interact and secure funding from BARDA. You know, having people here in the region and being able to go and actually meet with them, I think is really helpful, especially in these times when you can't get on a plane, you can't go, you know, you can't go anywhere, and there's very limited opportunity for physical collaboration. But this was something that I think was helpful in us being able to just, you know, go down and meet with them and help secure and help build that trust for how we can work together and what we can do as a partnership.
Yeah, Tracy, I think you're so right about that, and it's probably worth reiterating a point you made, Kalali, that I think the federal government, they can't look at any specific region and give any prioritization or favorability to a given region because they service the entire country. But at the same time, I think that close proximity does afford an opportunity to have dialogue that would be more difficult if you're not located in the region. And I think I'm drawing on my experience and what I've heard from folks at the federal institutions, both in my current role and in prior roles. Maybe one other example of where that close proximity can be beneficial. So there's an organization in the BioHealth Capital Region called BioHealth Innovation, and it's a regional intermediary that one of the programs they have is called an Entrepreneur in Residence program. And what they do is they have several entrepreneurs in residence at BHI that are partially funded by the NIH. And effectively, these individuals go into federal labs. Some of them also go into local universities, and they try to find the best technologies, the technologies that have the most potential for future application, and then develop those technologies, form companies out of those. And I think what affords the opportunity to do that is the fact that BHI is physically located in the region. So that's just another example of where I think that federal proximity is valuable. So I recognize we've only got a few minutes here, so maybe just two last questions. One is there anything that maybe we haven't talked about today that somebody would like to highlight? And then if not, we'll move into closing remarks.
Jared, this is Amy. I would love to just quickly talk about the investment in the BioHealth Capital Region. I know Maryland Tech Council as well as VA Bio really helped to foster some of that. Just speaking on the Virginia side, and would love to hear more from the expertise in Maryland. We have funding to assist with developing technologies and commercializing those, as well as our Virginia economic development and local economic development incentives to recruit and retain companies in the area. So I think it's just a very friendly area with investments to make sure that we grow the life sciences bioeconomy.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is investors are becoming more and more interested in this region, in the technologies. And I think we've seen that over the past couple of years where they're realizing in some respects it was sort of like a sleeping giant just about to be awakened. And there probably are other folks that have had similar experiences with that. And in fact, there was a J Labs that opened up recently, and I think part of that, which Kalala, you are intimately familiar with, they recognized some of that great technology and the opportunity to attract the talent, the technology, and the investment into some of these local opportunities. Anybody else want to comment on that?
Yeah, it would be amiss if we didn't mention J Labs at Washington, D.C. And we went through this exercise of socializing the benefits of BioHealth Capital Region to Johnson & Johnson when we started introducing and inviting them to come to the region. So they carefully examined, all the benefits of having a J Labs in BioHealth Capital Region. Although it's located in Washington, D.C., but it's a regional resource that serves Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia, and also nationally. But it was really a great selling point to Johnson & Johnson on why they should have another site, number 13, and likely the final J Labs in the United States. So I think that, with the help of everyone, I actually on this panel, and lots of our partners in Maryland, Virginia, great leadership by Rich Bendis at BioHealth Innovation that help us make that case for the region and win a J Labs in DC. So I think that's going to be a great resource for entrepreneurs, for startup companies that are looking for an incubation space that also comes with mentorship, introduction to investors, and much more.
And then, Jared, I guess I can do a quick plug for the state of Maryland. There's a number of incentive programs, including tax credits and R&D tax credits, which is helpful for companies as they come to establish themselves. And then Montgomery County, where a larger concentration of companies are located, there's a very significant partnership there, a number of initiatives, both supporting companies, but as well as companies giving back and supporting many STEM programs that help the community. So there's a lot of community involvement as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so we'll just do a quick round robin, maybe one takeaway point or a key message that you'd like to offer in your closing remarks, and then maybe we'll do that quickly and then wrap up here. All right, Amy, if you don't mind, I will call on you first and then sort of work my way around the screen.
Absolutely. So, what I'm really pleased to say is just all of the deliberative programming that's done by BioHealth Innovation, by our association, Virginia Bio Association, Maryland Tech Council, et cetera, to continuously bring us together to be able to forge those partnerships and advance science. It's a great place to be.
All right, Kalala.
I would steal a line from Rich Bendis that you cannot possibly recreate an ecosystem like this anywhere in the world. So, the proximity to NIH and FDA, there is only one of each in the world. And I think this is a very unique region and also a great place to live and raise families. So can't say more, and the credit of the line that I stole goes to Rich.
All right, Tracy?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the region has really worked hard to build and bring a number of opportunities for pharma and biotech presence. and help bring these groups together so that they can build off of each other and really start to establish a community. It's really, really gratifying to see the companies making those connections, developing their partnerships, developing relationships and funding at local events, and just in general to see investors starting to look at companies in our region and starting to understand the vibrancy of the region and the opportunities, and start to recognize that. So it's a great place to be, and as Kalila said, it's a great place to live as well.
Right. And Bill, sorry for being last. You're on the far right side of my screen. So
no problem. So what I'd like to say is that I think that BHI and Rich Bendis have done a great job at creating some resources along with the Maryland Tech Council, and it creates a great environment for us to build our companies and our institutions around. And then there's so many fine nonprofit organizations that are really headquartered in the Washington area, which I think have add an extra layer of resource beyond the obvious. And so this is certainly an up and coming region for our technologies and our biotech community. And so it's exciting to be here and kind of watch it evolve over the last few years.
all right, great. And I guess if I were leaving everyone with one point, we hope that the BioHealth Capital Region becomes one of the top 3 BioHealth clusters by 2023. That has been our vision. I think we're making great progress toward that, and being able to pick up the phone and call one of you at any time, I think just demonstrates the ability we have here to collaborate. And I would like to say a special thank you to all of the panelists, a special thank you to the folks at Resi and Life Sciences Nation for hosting this. And before we close out, if we could just briefly go around, and if everyone could say your email address, that would be great. So my name again is Jared Borkat. My email is borkatj@ebsi.com. So Bill, maybe if you don't mind.
Yep, I'm Colin Daniel. My email is keskanda@childrensnational.org.
All right, Amy.
Sure, Amy.
Come back to you, Bill.
A, B as in Victor, ANMETE@gmu.edu.
Tracy.
TRACEY.Vetterick, VETTERICK@AstraZeneca.com.
And last but absolutely not least, Bill.
It's bhearl, BHEARL, @immunomix.com, which is IMMUNOMIX.com.
All right, so thank you again, everyone. It was great speaking with all of you, and stay well, stay safe, and we'll talk again soon. So have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.